Nutrition for ultramarathon runners is essential to meet the physiological demands of training, competing, and recovery. The biggest challenge ultramarathon runners face is meeting daily energy requirements. Energy and nutritional deficits can cause a host of problems for athletes, like reduced performance, increased risk of injuries and illnesses, and can lead to relative energy deficiency syndrome in sport, which can have long-term health consequences. Poorly managed nutrition can increase the risk of gastrointestinal dysfunction. Lower intakes of nutrients during races is correlated to higher rates of athletes not finishing. And poorly managed hydration is not just linked to poor performance, but it can also have long-term health effects and even be fatal. Ultramarathon runners have very individualized nutritional needs, and a sports nutritionist can help these athletes optimize their nutritional status. They can monitor intakes by conducting dietary analysis. They can help customize nutrition plans by identifying evidence-based guidelines and recommending foods accordingly. They can help manage food around personal preferences and lifestyle factors. And if appropriately trained, they can monitor body composition and anthropometrics. They can provide nutrition education to explain the important role of nutrition and be a source of reliable information. So there's lots of sports nutritionists can do to help support these athletes. Generally, ultramarathon runners that are undertaking endurance training need an energy intake of 160 to 260 kilojoules per kilogram per day. Carbohydrates are important for fuel and to replenish glycogen stores and should make up about 60% of energy, which will be 5 to 8 grams per kilo per day. Protein should make up about 15%, and it's important for muscle protein synthesis. Intakes should be 1.3 to 2.1 grams per kilo per day. Protein should be spaced evenly over the day on 4 or 5 eating occasions at about 0.3 to 0.4 grams per kilo. Fat is necessary to meet energy needs, and intake should be 1 to 1.5 grams per kilo per day. But for higher training demands, training at faster pace or in race conditions such as high altitude or extreme temperatures, carbohydrate recommendations increase to 7 to 10 grams per kilo per day, protein up to 2.5 grams per kilo per day, and fat up to 2 grams per kilo per day. What is extremely important during training is to practice race nutrition. Athletes need to try to increase their gut capacity, practice the types of food and the level of intake that's required for racing. Pre-race, when exercise is tapered, carbohydrate loading and supercompensation of glycogen stores is the goal. 36 to 48 hours before a race, athletes should have a carbohydrate intake of 10 to 12 grams per kilo per day. 24 hours before, athletes should aim for 7 to 12 grams per kilo per day. Low residue diets are important during this time, and removing any foods that may cause GI distress. 1 to 4 hours before a race, the pre-race meal should be 1 to 1.4 grams per kilo of carbohydrate with reduced fat, reduced fiber, and reduced protein to avoid any GI issues. For racing, the focus is on carbohydrates. Energy intake should be 630 to 1,670 kilojoules per hour and up to 90 grams per hour of a multiple transport carbohydrate, which is a 2-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio. Multiple transport carbohydrates have an increased intestinal absorption, increased carbohydrate oxidation rate, and cause less GI discomfort. Most athletes, though, struggle to achieve these intakes as they suffer from appetite dysfunction, taste fatigue, and the onset of gastrointestinal problems. As races progress, runners increasingly find sweet foods unpalatable and begin to crave savoury, high-fat, high-salt foods. Immediately after running, athletes need 1 to 1.2 grams per kilo of carbohydrates combined with 0.3 to 0.4 grams of protein. This is to restore muscle glycogen and for muscle protein synthesis. Athletes' diets should be able to supply all the macro and micronutrient requirements. However, iron might be a consideration. Training at altitude, losses through sweat, gastrointestinal bleeding, and foot strike hemolysis may compromise iron levels and athletes may need to focus on iron-rich foods like red meats or fortified cereals. Because foods athletes eat during races need to be practiced during training, food recommendations cover both. Athletes need to focus on energy-dense food to meet their energy needs, and carbohydrates are very important. Common foods consumed are sandwiches, fruitcake, granola bars, fruits like dates, bananas, watermelons, boiled potatoes. Energy bars and sports bars are popular. As races progress and the desire for high salt and savory food increases, common foods become potato chips, salted nuts, pretzels, olives, cheese, salami. If a race is self-supported, freeze-dried meals and dried cereals are consumed. Sports drinks and energy gels are popular ways to both rehydrate and deliver nutrients. However, runners find these increasingly unpalatable due to their level of sweetness, and as a race progresses, an athlete may want different flavors to help guard against this, which leads me to hydration. Ultramarathon runners are at risk for dehydration and hyponatremia. The general recommendation is to drink 450 to 750 mils per hour or 150 to 250 mils every 20 minutes. However, drinking to thirst is considered the best way to protect against both over and underhydration. Athletes should begin training or racing in a euhydrated state. In hot or humid conditions, pre-cooled drinks may enhance hydration and help with thermoregulation. Monitoring hydration can be challenging during racing. The most practical way is to measure changes in pre and post exercise body mass. Losses should be kept to less than 2 to 3% of body mass, and rehydration needs to replace this loss at 150% over several hours. Athletes need to be mindful of sodium levels and consume drinks and foods that would be equivalent to 460 milligrams per litre of sodium. Athletes, understandably, want to gain an advantage over their competitors, and often they look at supplements as a way to do this. Athletes can have a misguided view that supplements can optimize their performance, but research suggests that at best they only have marginal effect when part of a tailored nutrition and training program. There are risks to taking supplements, like being exposed to banned substances. Athletes can experience side effects or ingest unsafe levels, and any perceived improvement may actually be due to the placebo effect and not the supplement itself. Two supplements that may have marginal benefits are caffeine and nitrates. Caffeine plays a role in intramuscular calcium release, helping muscle contractile function, and it can improve cognitive function and increase concentration, which may be beneficial in the later stages of a race or when racing on consecutive days. Doses of 1 to 2 milligrams per kilo every few hours is well tolerated. This can be in drinks, tablets, or gum. And post-exercise, 3 milligrams per kilo combined with carbohydrates can enhance glycogen repletion. Caffeine does have side effects, including GI distress, headaches, anxiety, and sleep disturbances, and genetic variance means there's a wide range of individual response. Nitrates can increase vasodilation, blood flow, and oxygen regulation, helping muscle function, increase mitochondrial respiration and biogenesis, and increase glucose uptake. Doses of 300 to 600 milligrams or 500 milliliters of beetroot juice would be taken 90 minutes prior to exercise, or athletes can have a 6-day high nitrate diet prior to a race. But nitrate supplements are prone to becoming rancid, and possible side effects to nitrates include GI problems and low blood pressure or hypotension. As with everything, any supplement needs to be well practiced during training. Endurance athletes have a higher rate of developing eating disorders or disordered eating and undertaking unhealthy weight loss programs. As I've said, ultra runners struggle to consume enough energy, which can lead to low energy availability and ultimately RED-S, or relative energy deficiency in sport. This can have negative effects on performance, but it also has long-term implications on metabolism, hormonal function, bone health, immunity, and cardiovascular health. Preventative education programs and screening to identify at-risk athletes is important, as early detection and intervention can prevent long-term health consequences. But it is not within the scope of practice for a sports nutritionist to work with any athlete that presents with these types of complexities, and if they have noticed any signs when working with an athlete, they need to refer them on. Treatment for these athletes requires a dedicated team of experts that are well trained in these specific areas. They can implement appropriate monitoring strategies as well as treatments. Thank you for listening.